Welcome, everyone, to today's event. A reminder to reporters on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You are limited to one question and one follow-up. I will now turn it over to Minister of Children and Family Development, Mitzi Dean.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Tianasque Nasne Mitzi Dean. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, now known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, on whose land we do our work. I go by she, her pronouns, and I spoke in the Lekwungen language to show my deep appreciation and respect. I'm going to start by introducing our guest speakers joining me today for this exciting announcement. We have Katrina Chen, Minister of State for Childcare, and she's with me here in the BC Legislature today in Victoria. We have two guests joining us virtually. Sharon Gregson of the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC, and Jenny Oikawa, a working mother whose family has benefited from our investments in childcare. This morning, I was so honoured to introduce the first reading of two new pieces of legislation that will build the foundation for an inclusive, universal childcare system for BC families. The Early Learning and Childcare Act and the Early Childhood Educators Act. The first new proposed legislation carries on the work first started 25 years ago when the original BC Childcare Act was introduced in 1996, of building an accessible, affordable, quality and inclusive childcare system. When enacted, the Early Learning and Childcare Act will increase transparency and accountability on government progress towards building an inclusive, universal childcare system. The proposed Early Childhood Educators Act will help strengthen the quality and capacity of the early learning and childcare workforce and help to improve the oversight of people who care for children in our province. It's my honour now to pass it over to my colleague, the Minister of State for Childcare, Katrina Chen, to provide more details on how these new pieces of legislation will improve the services we provide and benefit children and families across BC.
Thank you so much, Minister Dean, and good day, everybody. I also want to begin by recognizing I'm speaking here from the unceded traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, and also thank Sharon and Sharon's little grandchild, and also Jenny, for joining us for this conversation today. And I cannot tell you how thankful and emotional I am when Minister Dean this morning introduced the two legislations. Thank you, Minister Dean, for always being such a champion on gender equity, and childcare is a really important part of the gender equity work that we do, is to build a more equitable society for all. That we all know investing in childcare is so crucial for children, for their early learning needs, for parents to have more options, and also good for our economy as a whole, especially during this critical time with our economic recovery. Last week, we were just here celebrating our milestone of reaching the fastest space creation ever in BC's history, of exceeding our target, and have supported the creation of over 26,000 spaces. And today, another important milestone that we're celebrating today, to build on a stronger foundation, to build on the work that we've done during the past 3.5 years, to continue this journey, to bring a new social program for BC families and quality, inclusive, affordable early learning services for BC families. And when I started this work in 2017 and 18, I remember as a mom who struggled with childcare, actually continues to struggle with childcare, I always look at the system and thinking about how come there's so many gaps. And I also learned about the history of childcare, as Minister Dean has said. This work really started in the 90s when we were in the government in the 90s to introduce the Childcare BC Act and to start that journey to look at affordability, quality, and accessibility. But unfortunately, for many, many years, because of government decisions, because of the former BC Liberal government decisions, that parents have lost affordability. Some parents saw their fee increased by $100, $200 a month because of government's decisions and lack of action. Wage top up for early childhood educators were even taken away, and that's not acceptable. And before I dive into the details about the two legislation that we're introducing today, I also really want to take the opportunity to thank a lot of people that have brought us here today, including advocates like Sharon Gregson, including parents like Jenny, including families and professionals who have been sharing your stories with us, sharing your struggles, and look at the gaps in this current system. I also really want to give a big shout out to Parliamentary Secretary Nikki Sharma, current MLA, who was the first one to say, how about in legislation? How about we started this work to build on the foundation that we are already building 3.5 years ago when she was working with our childcare team. And also a lot of the ministry staff, professionals, including my senior ministerial advisor, Serena, who all the incredible women actually have been working so hard on this childcare plan. And I thank you. And I thank all the parents in BC for your patience, and parents cannot wait. And that is why today's announcement is so important, that the two pieces of legislation really are a long time coming. It's time that we enshrine the work that we've done, the foundation that we've built during the past 3.5 years into legislation to continue to build an inclusive, high quality early learning care system that will support BC families, that will continue to evolve over time to support the changing needs of BC families. So I'll begin by telling you more about the Early Learning and Childcare Act, which combines the Childcare BC Act and the Childcare Subsidy Act to ensure that we can continue to build a system. It's a systematic approach. It is not patchwork. We need to allow the use of grants, for example, to improve the inclusiveness of childcare, to make sure inclusion is the big part of our plan, and also supporting more Indigenous-led childcare to make sure we can work together with Indigenous rights holders and communities to be able to build more inclusive, culturally inclusive early learning and care services. We also need to support children who require extra support. This is another area that many families are struggling with childcare, but if you're a family who has a child who requires extra support, that early intervention is so important, and the services is really hard to find at times. So this legislation will also support government's work to make sure childcare are inclusive and supporting more children with extra support needs. It also holds the government accountable. We're going to do annual reporting to ensure. Actually, I'll be the person who is going to deliver that and be responsible to ensure that we track the progress that we're making on affordability, quality, accessibility, and inclusiveness of childcare. And the minister will also have the authority to create new regulations, including the ability to set limit on childcare fees for parents, because parents have been struggling for too many years with high cost of childcare, even though we've done 3 different measures with the fee reduction, affordable childcare benefit, the prototype site to bring down the cost of childcare. First time in BC's history, and many parents have been benefiting from the program, but we need to continue to make sure parents have more affordable childcare options. And this legislation really signals our government's commitment, again, to build a social program, to make sure that we have a new system for all BC families that will benefit generations to come. And the Early Childhood Educators Act is another step to ensure that we recognize and support the work of early childhood educators. They are the workforce behind the workforce. They are, and the vast majority of early childhood educators, again, are women. 97% of early childhood educators in BC are women. And we need to make sure that their work is recognized. They're so critical to our economy when parents can return to work, pursue their career or educational goals. And we need to thank early childhood educators for their critical work, looking for the most precious thing in our life, our babies. So when passed, the Early Childhood Educators Act will increase the oversight for people involved in the care of children. So professionals who are working in the field, their information will be published on the public registry of early childhood educators, supports transparency, and also supports families who are looking for childcare to be able to look up and make sure that they are utilizing the service of an early childhood educator and professional. It will also help to address some of the staff shortages that we have in the sector, including supporting and making sure the credential recognition process is smoother, and also making sure people who are trained outside of BC, who have the expertise and the training and the education required, can have a better ways of transferring their credential to BC and being able to provide the services that we all need. And it will also help to create a public registry for a list of approved post-secondary institutions, again, to ensure approved quality post-secondary institutions and programs information is available when employers are looking for ECs and ensuring that they are trained by recognized institutions. There's going to be better accountability to expand the early childhood educators registry and the registrar's ability to review investigation complaints and improve the standard and quality of services. This is great news for BC family, and the two acts together, the two legislations together, will help us and support the work that we've been doing during the past 3.5 years to continue this journey to create a new social program. I'm excited about this opportunity, and again, I really want to thank everybody who has been part of this journey to bring affordable, high-quality, universal early learning and care system to BC families. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Chen, for your passion and all of your work. We're just really, we're really blessed to have you doing this work here in British Columbia. Now, our next speaker has, for several decades, been advocating for childcare policy change on behalf of BC families. It's my pleasure to introduce Sharon Gregson of the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC to share more on how this legislation will support our common goal of delivering inclusive, universal childcare. Sharon.
Thank you very much, Minister Dean. And yes, several decades. I've been advocating since 1987 for childcare when I was a young parent and needed childcare myself for my sons and daughters. And you'll see behind me my grandson, who I am caring for because his parents now still can't find full-time, quality, affordable childcare. So it's a pleasure to be here today for this announcement of a BC Early Learning and Childcare Act specifically, and the Early Childhood Educators Act. The Coalition of Childcare Advocates and the Early Childhood Educators of BC have been calling for new legislation since the $10 a day plan was first released in 2011. And this is an important step forward, but of course, as Minister Chen mentioned, there's much more for government to do to ensure that all BC families who choose childcare actually have access to a quality license program. And that will be a program where fees for all families are no more than $10 a day, a program that meets the needs of families in all their diversities, that are culturally safe, that are flexible, beyond the traditional Monday to Friday 9 to 5 childcare, and importantly, where professional staff are well educated and well compensated for their important work. And with the upcoming move of childcare from the Ministry for Children and Family Development to the Ministry of Education, and importantly, significant new federal funding available to British Columbia, we'll be advocating for a massive expansion of $10 a day childcare programs across the province so that it isn't just the lucky few who experience the prototype sites. And we'll be calling for a competitive wage grid for early childhood educators and a compensation package for them, all part of the universal system that families need to be able to rely on in our province. So we're hopeful that these two new pieces of legislation will uplift early childhood educators in their profession and advance the high quality, affordable public childcare system that British Columbians expect. And as new legislation was an election promise from the NDP in 2020 in the fall election, just the end of last year, we look forward to government fulfilling the remainder of its childcare commitments to British Columbians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. You've long advocated for changes to make sure that families can find affordable, quality and inclusive childcare in their communities, and here we are on the next steps of that pathway. And the pandemic has shone a light on something that we've known for a long time as well, that access to inclusive, affordable childcare isn't simply good social policy, it's also vital to BC's economy. We know that working parents, and especially working mums, have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And access to quality, affordable, inclusive childcare is one of the biggest barriers for women in achieving equal wages and employment opportunities. and to speak to that reality that so many women have faced. It's a real pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker, a mother working and raising her family in Vancouver. Please welcome Jenny Oikawa. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm here speaking from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations in Vancouver, and it's I had after my child was born, I knew I had really wanted to go back to school for a big career change, and I was really worried about managing childcare and being able to go to school. And so, when my child had gotten into the daycare, where I had put him on the list when I was just had gotten pregnant, so he'd been on for a long time, and I found out that it was a 10-a-day spot. I felt like I had won the lottery, and I wouldn't be able to be following my dreams the way that I want to without this daycare. And I'm just beyond grateful to have gotten into the pilot program. And I think the childcare, the future of childcare in this province, the way the government will provide it, will just change so many lives.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And we hear from so many parents, mums especially, of stories like yours. And as you say, it's truly life-changing. And it sets especially mothers on a different pathway, not just in the immediacy when they're accessing childcare, but for the rest of their career or whatever they're choosing. So in closing, I want to thank everybody who worked on the development of this legislation, and for everybody who continues to support the delivery of affordable, quality and inclusive childcare in British Columbia. I know we have a lot of partners, a whole range of partners, and they're very diverse, and we really appreciate everybody who's working in partnership with us in working on this system. We're committed, our government is committed to transforming BC's early learning and childcare system, and the introduction of these two new pieces of legislation is key to our plan. So now we're going to open up for questions from the media, and I will turn over to Minister Chen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. A reminder to reporters on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You are limited to one question and one follow-up. First question, we have Lisa Yuzda, News 1130.
Hi there, ministers. I'm just wondering, you're saying that this is going to make more accountable and people are going to see what's being done. How? How do those of us who are looking for childcare, how do we know that more is being done? How are those of us as journalists going to know that you're actually doing more? It seems like there's a lot of different pieces that are still in separate piles.
Thank you, and that's a really important question. So there's a lot of work that has done through this legislation, the two legislations actually, to make sure that the government continues to build on what we've built on from the past 3.5 years to commit to affordability, quality, accessibility, and inclusion. We've rolled out over 3 dozens of programs in short 3.5 years, and a lot of those programs are so critical, like families like Jenny's, to be able to get affordable childcare so she can, my understanding is Jenny is actually becoming a teacher and she can contribute, making a higher income and supporting her family. And we want those investments to stay there and to expand. So this is really a journey about building the foundation and stronger to continue and hold the government accountable. So every single year, for example, for now, it's me who will be doing the annual reporting on the progress that's being made on affordability, quality, accessibility, and inclusion. And parents will continue to see those investments coming through our programs that we've been rolling out. Parents, for example, will also have a better access to get information about early childhood educators online. The online registry will help for parents to have better information about the caregivers who are looking after their children. This will also help to support the workforce when we expedite and make sure the credential recognition process gets better. At the same time, this legislation also gives the ministers authority to enter agreements with Indigenous rights holders to be able to create more Indigenous and culturally inclusive early learning and care services. Another part of this legislation, for example, will also authorize the minister to focus on the child as a whole, whether they're under 5 or K2. We're going to build that smooth transition, especially as the role of childcare moves into the Ministry of Education. Again, this is really a systematic change to continue to build on the foundation that we've already been building on during the past 3.5 years. Thank you.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, talking about the K to 12, one of the big issues that a lot of parents have is they've gotten out of the needing a child care all day while they're at work. Now they need before and after school care. So how quickly are we going to see changes in that, and how are you working with the Teachers Federation and those working in the schools to make that more accessible to people?
We have been working with a lot of stakeholders and partners, including professionals who are currently early childhood educators on or off school grounds. And we're already creating a lot of spaces. Actually, during the past 3.5 years, our space creation program has been really successful. We've already supported the creation of over 26,000 spaces, and 70% of those spaces will become in operation in the coming year. And this is a significant amount of spaces that we are seeing coming up in operation, serving BC families across our BC communities. And a lot of those spaces are actually on school grounds, including in my community. For example, in Burnaby, last week, we just had parents talking about how on-school ground childcare has really benefited her family. And before and after school care is definitely a focus for this government. And also, I know our federal counterpart, the federal government, also has put a focus on before and after school care. So more spaces are being built at the same time as we continue to build a new social program. And families will see more and more of early learning and care services on public grounds that become long-term community assets.
Next question, Lisa Cordasco, Vancouver Sun.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm wondering, Minister, what does it say about the system when one of your guests says that she has to be her grandchild's caregiver because of lack of care, and the other guest says she feels like she won a lottery because she's part of a pilot program for $10 daycare? When will this be more universal?
Sorry, Lisa, we had a bit of trouble hearing you in the studio. I believe you asked, when will this become more universal? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you so much. Yes, we are accelerating the creation of more affordable, high-quality early learning spaces. At the same time, we have 3 different measures to support affordability, including the fee reduction, with over 90% of providers joining the program, saving up to $350 a month to see a reduction in their fees. We have the Affordable Childcare Benefit Program that's income tested all up to the income of $111,000. So a lot of middle-income families are already benefiting from $10 a day as a result of those 2 programs, along with the prototype site that Jenny was talking about, that her those programs are being expanded. Currently, we have this year to double the prototype site spaces, and we will continue to build on that and see how we can create a better program. There's a lot of work that's being done to look at what's the best way to bring down the cost of childcare. So, for example, part of this legislation also make sure the government is committed and gives the ministers the authority to continue to invest on affordable childcare, including looking at making sure that fees don't continue to increase in this province.
And Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. What are your plans or your goals for what you're calling Indigenous-led childcare?
We would definitely love to partner and work with Indigenous rights holders to ensure that there are more and more Indigenous-led childcare. I've learned so much from the Indigenous communities during the past 3.5 years about what's important for their children and families. And childcare doesn't only support the child, they really support families as a whole and supporting a community altogether. We already have great examples, including the Aboriginal Head Start program that we're also expanding this year with more spaces into Aboriginal Head Start program that's no fee at all, serving Indigenous families and their children with wraparound services, inclusive early early learning and care services, and those are the opportunities that we want to continue to expand, and also learning from Indigenous leaders and rights holders and communities about what to do is the best for, what would be the best thing to do to serve their family and children's needs.
And next question, Rob Shaw, Check News.
Hi. Could you speak a bit more about the ability to cap or set a limit on childcare fees in the legislation? Is this different than the current cap on the new facilities that get CCFRI money and have to keep their fees at the 70th percentile? Are you talking about expanding that or doing something along those lines, or is this a different limit on childcare fees, and what would it mean?
Thank you. We are definitely looking at ways to keep childcare more affordable, as historically childcare fees continue to increase, especially it has increased significantly during the past 20 years. So this legislation is really about giving the ministers authority to look at what's the best way to fund affordability, to create new regulations, for example, including the ability to set limit on childcare fees for parents. So that could be an example of what we already have been doing with the new rule for new childcare providers coming into the fee reduction program, that they are required to set their fees at or below the 70th percentile. And that's one of the examples that we could work with providers while we continue to give providers and early childhood educators the support they need to for their operating fund, for their wage enhancement, or for funding to maintain their spaces. At the same time, the measures that we're rolling out for parent affordability is going to be into parents' pocket to make sure we continue to keep childcare fee low. So at this moment, we are still exploring different options. We're learning from our 3 different affordability measures, working with providers. We'll continue to engage with the sector to ensure that as we support providers and early childhood educators, parents are going to see fees being reduced in this province. And our goal and our vision is really to ensure that all families in BC, for those who want it or needs childcare services and early learning care services, they will get affordable, high-quality early learning and care.
Rob, did you have a follow-up?
Sure, thanks. Onto the ECE registry, could you sort of compare that to the regulatory colleges that exist for other professions in BC, teachers or health professionals or that type of thing? Is this that, or is it a lesser version of that is just focused more on accreditation? And what does it allow a parent to do if an ECE person has been disciplined or committed some type of misconduct? Like, what can they see about that person online given privacy restrictions? And maybe you could expand on that.
Yes, so it is important that we support the profession. This is a sector that has been, unfortunately, working with low wages and lack of support for many years, and we've rolled out over a dozen of initiatives to support early childhood educators. Currently, early childhood educators are registered with our ECE registry. So that's under the Ministry of Children and Family Development. It's a registry with a list of all the early childhood educators, but currently that information is not available to the public. So to ensure that we enhance quality and support parent needs and also supporting more transparency, this new legislation will increase that oversight to make sure there is a public early childhood educators registry with a list of early childhood educators who are qualified to do the work, so parents know who their children, who are the people and professionals looking after their young kids. But at the same time, we will also work with post-secondary institutions to enhance the quality of their programs, along with a list of the post-secondary institutions that are approved by the registry to be able to carry out those programs. And it will also help to give the registrar and the registry more ability to review investigations, complaints, and those information will be, we're working on the regulations to see how we can make those information available so parents have a peace of mind when you're giving the most important person in your life, your babies, to a stranger, a professional who is looking after your child. You know their background, you know their qualification and training, and also at the same time supporting the process of getting an early childhood educator being registered and being able to practice here in BC. So there's a lot of work that's putting into the Early Childhood Educators Act to address the shortage in transparency and accountability.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's event. Thank you to the presenters. If you wouldn't mind hanging on, and we'll take a photo of everyone who participated today. Thanks all.
Thank you so much.